This is really amazing, and I'm seeing over 100 people, 117, 118 people coming to the chat. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I'm gonna just give a little pregame show while people are coming in. I know everyone's exhausted, nerves are frayed, surviving. Survival is success for all of us right now, I think. Um, we were on a call a little while before this, and everyone we did a check, and everyone's like, "I'm tired," and somebody yawned, and I was like, "Yes, you're yawning for all of us. Like we've all been working so hard for so long to get here." And we almost didn't do this call because it was like we're too busy to do a call and make people, just get on a call. But we were like, you know what? Let's just do it informally. We won't do a big slide deck. We just asked our incredible state advisors, can you just take an hour out of all the work you're doing in your states and just share, just share with us like what's going on in North Carolina, what's going on in Florida and Michigan and Wisconsin, Arizona. So we're really, really lucky to have our incredible state advisor, a big part of our state advisor team with us on this call right now. So like I said, this is the last call before the election. I'm Billy Wimsatt. I'm the just really honored to be the executive director of Movement Voter Project. And the vibe on this call is we're just going to celebrate. Okay, we're going to celebrate. We're winning, and we don't know what the results are yet, but we're winning in the sense that the groups that we have funded are doing amazing work. Like they are winning in their local communities. They are winning it, and we're winning because we have been kicking ass supporting them. We have been doing incredible donor organizing. Just want to just so appreciate everyone on this call and everyone you've been working with. It's got us to this point that, and I have to say, a lot of people have been waiting for this for 4 years. I've actually been working toward this particular election since at least 2012. It was actually after the 2010 election when we got clobbered in the midterms right before the census and redistricting. I was like, oh my God, we've got to do this redistricting thing better. When's the next chance? 2020. Okay, what's going to happen in 2020? Oh, it's going to be a presidential election, not a midterm. Millennials are going to be a third of the electorate in 20. So I remember I was at a party like talking to the head of MoveOn, and I was like, we got to get ready for 2020. It's going to be this incredible opportunity. If we have a wave in 2020, we can make the whole decade of the 2020s a progressive decade. And that has been really the guiding light of my entire life, for the last 8 to 10 years, like getting ready for this day. And so it's like surreal that we are now, election is happening every single day. There are millions of votes being cast every day. It's like GOTV every day. And we're only 12 days out from the final day to do that. And am I in message, Elizabeth? Elizabeth, our comms director, has been talking to us about how to talk about the 2020 election. You're going to get some great notes from her toward the end of the call. So anyway, I'm just so proud. I'm so proud of every two that you've never heard of in states where you may not have ever been that are going to save us, and we need to find them and support them. And that was like this really obvious idea, actually, to make it easy for people to do that. And we started this teeny tiny thing, and now over 30,000 people have donated with this theory of change to these groups. Collectively, we've moved getting close to $100 million, to over 400 groups, big groups, little groups, amazing organizations. And I wish I could basically we don't want to take any of their time. So you'll get to know more of them after the election when the dust settles. But so yeah, it's like our hearts are just so full with all of the conversations that we get to have with these organizations and get to hear about their work and get to watch them grow and get to watch their struggles and challenges and victories. And so, yeah, so I want to get us really quickly into hearing from state advisors who are closer to the ground, working these groups, you know, every day. And just to say that this is a long-term thing that we're doing, right? You know, I just said I've been working toward this one election for almost 10 years, and our vision to make the 2020s a progressive decade is is you know, it's not going to end. It's going to. Someone just said the election is a comma, not a period. So we're trying to like win as big as we can to set ourselves up to make the 2020s a progressive decade, and we're ready both for, you know, worst case scenarios. Our groups have been planning for months for like what a contested election could look like and how to deal with all the different scenarios of that. And on the other hand, we're starting to have kind of excited conversations about like, what if we win? What if we win big? What are the policies that we want to have passed and executive orders? And that stuff will start really soon. You know, if we have a good outcome, both at the national level and at the state level, because we're fighting for all this stuff at the state level too. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to some of my heroes. And we're going to start with Corina from Arizona. We're going to hear first from Arizona, and then Wisconsin, and then Florida, and then Michigan and Pennsylvania, which have been our kind of top 5 battleground states. And then we're going to talk about mostly Senate states. So we're going to talk about North Carolina, Georgia, Texas, Iowa, and Myrna's going to round us out with all the other Senate states, because we're playing in every state that matters. We look for the tipping points, and then we invest deep, because you never know which is going to be the tipping point. So without further ado, so just to give you a little bit more of a kind of what to expect, you know, so I asked each person to talk for 4 or 5 minutes, you know, and share kind of like some big picture things and something that's inspiring them or something we wouldn't know from looking at the news, a story, a conversation they had from a local group. And just to share informally, like we're all sitting around, you know, having brunch or something, like this is what's going on. And then our amazing comms director Elizabeth is gonna share some like strategic messaging about how we should be thinking and talking about the election, and then we're going to talk about donor organizing with Naomi, our donor organizing guru, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions. The meat of the call, the heart of the call, will go for an hour, and then we'll have some time after to do Q&A. In the meantime, you can be active in the chat. People are using the chat, and feel free to like you know, write in the chat, you know, cheers, questions, and our state advisors as much as they can, and other folks on our team can respond to questions. And we're also going to, you know, encourage you all to keep donor organizing. Like a lot of the donor organizing is slowed down. We had, I think, about and if you're new to MVP, welcome. And if you're, you know, someone who's been with us, thank you for everything you've done. Like we did this together, and then we're gonna have a call after the election. I hope everyone is already RSVP'd for the November 4th, 4 p.m. Eastern call. November 4th, 4 p.m. Right? We're going to debrief and hopefully celebrate a lot more. And this is just the start. I will let me pass it to Corina first from Arizona, who you might have seen in an Arizona video. If you haven't watched the Arizona video on the front page of movement.vote, it'll give you, it's a beautiful, amazing video. So Corina, give us a little Arizona update. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, yes, thank you everybody for joining us today. So excited to be talking about everything that's going on here in the beautiful state of Arizona. I am just so inspired. You know, I came into organizing because of all of the movement leaders and all of the movement organizing that was happening in the state. And I'm astounded cycle after cycle by the amazing grassroots um, organizing that happens in the state and has moved the needle and gotten us to the moment that we're in today, 10 years of power building. And so excited to talk about what's going on the ground. We are full swing into the election now. Folks are able to mail in their ballots. They're able to vote in person as well. But I want to uplift some of the work that got us pre-GOTV, that got us to this moment, this cycle. So our partners collectively were able to register over 185,000 voters, new voters this year. That's amazing. And one of the victories that we recently had, yes, 185 is huge. And these are all new American voters with a focus on young voters, women voters, people of color voters. So excited to add those folks to our electorate here in the state. And most recently, two of our partners, Mi Familia Vota Arizona and Our Voice, Our Vote, which is a Black-led organization here in the state, were able to come together to target the state secretary to push them to extend the voter registration deadline, because as we know, COVID has changed a lot of the circumstances and can affect the way people are thinking about voting. So we wanted to make sure that everybody in the state had the ability to come out and vote. So we wanted to extend that deadline. The Secretary of State said no. So there was a lawsuit that was filed by these two organizations, and we won. Initially, we got an extension from October 5th, which was the initial deadline, to October 23rd. So that was huge for us. The decision was appealed by the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, was pushed back to only a week, but we were able to, in that time, register an additional 35,000 voters. So that's 35,000 voters that would otherwise not have gotten the opportunity to participate in this year's election and be involved for cycles to come, right? So this is a way that our organizations are not only just going out and registering voters, but they are full swing election protection, protecting our democracy and making sure that we are pushing in each and every way possible to make sure that folks are being able to participate. So wanted to talk about that. This year, there's so much opportunity in Arizona. We're presidential swing. We have a Senate race. We are 2 seats away from flipping the state house, 4 from flipping the Senate. We have city council races. So like I said in the video, we are able to take back our power at every single level. And that's so exciting for us. And we've, again, can't say this enough, we've been building for this and working for this for the last 10 years. So we are ready. We are putting it on the universe that we're gonna be winning all of these elections. So just want to thank everyone that's been a part of that. We have 1/3 of our electorate that votes by mail every year. We have over 1 million votes cast already this year. That's 97% up from 2016 at this time. So we are historically seeing people come out in high numbers. Our partners have knocked over 700,000 doors despite the pandemic and are on track to knock 3 million. So this has not stopped us. It slowed us down there for a bit, but we bounced right back, and I'm so excited for what we're doing. I wanna also shed and uplift the work of Raise Arizona. I'm so proud to say that at the beginning of the year, MVP really strategized and thought about what were intentional ways that we could add to the expansion of infrastructure here in the state. And one of those ways was by investing in rural organizing. So we were one of the first, we gave Rural Arizona Engagement, Raise Arizona, which is in Pinal County, their first grant. And they've been able to grow so much and scale up this year. And they are out in Pinal County. Right now, they're working on the LD11 race, which is in Pinal County. a county that gets overlooked because most of our organizing is done in Maricopa and Pima. And they, polling is showing that seat 1% up in the poll. So it's very close. It's going to be one of those flippable seats that could get us to flip the state house. So it's so exciting to see that we were able to be the seed investment organization that has grown so much and is going to be able to invest or give back so much to the Arizona overall infrastructure. So there's still opportunity to support post-election. Our groups have been working with the National Fight Back Table to get ready for what's to come if any, funny business goes down and seats are contested. And we feel good about our plan and we're ready. So just looking for everyone to throw down when that time comes. So thank you for believing in Arizona. I believe in Arizona. I couldn't be more inspired and proud to be from here. And that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. And Corina has been helping so many groups like Raise Arizona get their first grants, take on turf that wasn't being covered. And it's really part of the untold story of Corina. How many groups do you guys fund in Arizona altogether?
Yeah, sorry about that. We do fund over 26 groups and they range in size. We have partners, which we call anchor partners, that have been around for years doing this work. And then we have groups that have just recently come into the fold that are filling some of those demographic gaps, like Native organizing, rural organizing, API organizing, uplifting and building more Black organizing in the state is something we've also been able to do this cycle.
Yeah, it's been really phenomenal. And behind the scenes, we've built this capacity building program that's helping all these groups get tools, pay for their texting. To Rima to go next and talk about Wisconsin. But yeah, Arizona, we're rooting for you. Go ahead, Rima. Yeah, a lot of you know Rima. Go ahead.
Hey, can folks hear me? I feel like there's a little bit of delay. Okay, great. Hey everyone, Rima Ahmed. I use she, her pronouns. Coming from you live from Wisconsin, where as of yesterday, over 1 million ballots have been cast in this election cycle. And I just have to say, if we're talking about celebrating on this call today, this is huge. This is together with absentee ballots and early voting started on Monday. 75,000 people voted on Monday alone in Wisconsin, which is pretty incredible. I mean, what we're looking at out here is that this is going to likely be the highest turnout election in Wisconsin history, period. And all of our partners are on board. It's pretty remarkable. And as I was reflecting on, getting to a reflective space as we are 12 days out from the election, it got me thinking about where we were this time 4 years ago. And I have to say, there is such a difference between the work that's happening this year and what was happening in 2016. 4 years ago, we didn't have some of these amazing organizations that are really leading critical work in Wisconsin, organizations like Block and like Lit. We also didn't have the same type of investment in the grassroots that we've been seeing, to the point where Voces is having a caravan to the polls. They had a virtual rally with Dolores Huerta yesterday. It's pretty incredible. And the other thing I want to say that's different between now and 4 years ago is not only that grassroots investment in organizing, but the fact that MVP has been part of seeding a lot of work that is now critical to the movement. And so one organization I want to uplift in that spirit is Progress North, a group in the northwest part of the state, right on the other side of the border from Minnesota. 1 year ago, we took a bet, basically, with a really amazing organizer that was living in Wisconsin, but doing organizing work in Minnesota. And she said, you know what? I want to organize in my own community. I want to organize in Northwest Wisconsin, a part of the state that so many people forget, in Native communities, with my family members and neighbors. And we said, bet, let's do it. Let's help you build this out. And today we have Progress North, an organization that is firmly a part of the ecosystem out here in Wisconsin, at the C4 table, the C3 table, that is taking a lead in our Wisconsin Fight Back table as we prepare for these post-election scenarios. So this is what it looks like when we do these deep investments year round and are uplifting the grassroots. And if you've been on any of our calls before, you'll hear, you've heard me talk about the fact that it has taken us 10 years to get to the point that we're at right now in Wisconsin, 10 years of disinvestment, of conservative just experimenting in our state. And it's going to take another 10 years for us to really see that progressive decade that I know Billy likes to talk a lot about and paints a really vivid picture of. And so regardless of the outcome on election day, I want to just remind us all that, like, while we've made significant strides in the last 4 years, it is going to take continuing to invest in the grassroots for us to really see a place where maybe we can, hopefully, not maybe, we will hopefully flip the state legislature from a Republican controlled legislature here in the state to something better. Redistricting is going to be huge in Wisconsin next year because we are one of the most gerrymandered states in the country. And we know it's because of this gerrymandering, you have situations where a majority of ballots cast in Wisconsin in 2018 were for Democrats. And yet, how is it that we still are 3 seats away from a Republican supermajority in both the state House and the state Senate? So, that's one thing I just want to leave folks with, is that we've made great strides, and the investments are hopefully going to continue and are going to need to continue if we're going to get to a progressive decade in Wisconsin. And I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I'll say just something that has me excited and hopeful is that this moment, and when I say this moment, I mean the last 7 months of us living in a pandemic and living in the hardest election that many of us experience in our lives. This moment has radicalized people in a way that, instead of being crippled with fear and uncertainty and unknowns, groups are working unapologetically for our communities and creating the vision of the world that our families, our friends, and our communities, our neighbors, everyone, that all of us need. And so that has me hopeful, it's carrying me through these next 12 days, and hopefully will carry us through beyond to continue to build out here in Wisconsin.
Thank you, Rima. And yeah, shout out to 2022. Wisconsin has a huge Senate race, as does Pennsylvania, North Carolina, et cetera. So we're already teeing up for doing 2020 in a way that tees us up for 2022. So let's go to Eric in Florida. Is Eric with us? Oh, there's Eric. Yeah, jump on in, Eric.
Hi, everyone. Excuse me. So I don't know if folks, any of you who have HBO, I do not actually, I got to sign up based on what I'm about to tell everyone, but there's this documentary that I think just came out in the last day or two by a guy named Billy Corbin, who's from Miami, where I am from, called 537 Votes. And it's about the whole recount process in the year 2000 in Florida, and really how the national election was stolen right here in Miami-Dade County. And I think is both a good reminder of why we have to continue to fight for every last vote. Also, in the scenario that we're about to be in, is probably a good thing for a lot of people to prepare yourselves, to think about your own communities and some of the shenanigans that could play out, and just learning from our past. I say that to just remind us all that Florida always comes down to the smallest of margins. And I pray to God that it will not be something like 537 votes this year, because I want to sleep for a little bit after Election Day. But it's always going to be close. And no matter what poll you've seen, outlier poll, oh my God, someone put out that someone's up by 8 in Florida, don't believe it. It's going to come down to less than 1%, either way. And so the contribution that MVP has made this cycle into the state has been enormous, and it has really helped a whole infrastructure blossom and operate at a scale that people, I just know, having been through many cycles here and seeing the growth of this infrastructure, it is better than it's ever been. It is night and day from where it was even 4 years ago. And it's been because of the contributions of MVP into 29 different groups, $17 million this cycle. It blows my mind. Groups are operating in 25 different counties. You know, we've registered here, just our MVP partners, 250,000 voters since the last election. But because of the pandemic, most people actually transitioned most of their voter registration infrastructure into vote by mail because our online voter registration is broken in Florida. And so people, you can register people to vote by mail over the phone. And because of that, right now we are seeing a huge unprecedented turnout of Democratic voters voting by mail in the state. As of last night, Democrats have outvoted Republicans by 560,000 votes on vote by mail. The vote by mail returns is 30% of voters of color. That's 10% higher than it was back in 2016. Now, in the first few days of early voting, Republicans are winning a little bit by 90,000, but that is something that we see, kind of expect, both because Republicans are much less because of what the president's saying, voting by mail, but also because Democratic voters tend to come out, especially on the weekends. And so we've got 2 weekends of early voting coming up where MVP partners are doing unprecedented turnout all around the state. So this Saturday, in over 30 cities across the state, there are going to be coordinated marches to the polls under the banner of Free the Vote. This is led by the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, which has responded to a lot of you have heard about the various attempts to really limit the impact of Amendment 4, which gave the right to vote back to 1.4 million returning citizens, people who have felony convictions in their past. That passed in 2018, but the Republican legislature essentially implemented a poll tax, and has really been an ongoing battle, essentially to limit the amount of people that are going to enter the electorate here in Florida. Because of that, FRC has called for communities, not just returning citizens, but all of their allies, their families, their neighbors, to march to the polls in over 30 different cities this Saturday to say, we're not afraid and we're not going to stand down. And this is the single biggest march to the polls that I've seen in Florida's history, coordinated across 30 cities. And then I told that to Billy, and he said, well, that's not actually happening in most cities in the country, or most states in the country. So you can actually say it's the biggest in the country. So I'm taking Billy's word there. But that is the first, pinnacle of this weekend. And then next weekend, the last Sunday of early voting is Souls to the Polls. And the largest in history Souls to the Polls turnout events have been 2 years ago. It was 25 events. Faith in Florida is a group, an MVP partner that really was working around passing that amendment to expand voting rights, and organized 25 events back in 2018, which was the largest they'd ever done at the time. This time around, on November 1st, they're organizing 75 different events around the state. And this is really the Black church. This is when you see a surge of Black voters on the last Sunday of early voting every cycle here. So these 2 upcoming weekends are really going to be, really important, because we all expect that, at least the way things happen here in Florida, is that Republicans are going to have really amazing turnout on election day. And so we're trying to make sure that our voters are getting their votes in the ballot as much as possible, either by mail or by election day or in early voting, so that we go into election day with a big lead. Our partners and the things that MVP has helped to make happen, are running amazing turnout programs. I'm just going to talk about a couple. Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, that I mentioned, is leading all these marches to the polls on Saturday, has knocked in over 400,000 doors after they put up a last-minute program in September to register an additional 30,000 voters just in September alone. They helped 40,000 people with fines and fees limited by the legislature's poll tax to pay off their fines, raising over $27 million to allow people not only to register to vote, to actually be able to live better lives, to get driver's licenses, to make it easier to get a job, and not have to live in perpetual debt. And so, they've just done amazing work in trying to capitalize on the promise of what Amendment 4 created 2 years ago, that MVP was also a huge supporter of back then. Then there's Florida for All, which is this coalition of over 8 different groups that have came together over the last several years and said, we can do things better at scale if we can figure out how to do things better. And my, oh my, have they figured out how to do that. They have made over 36 million voter attempts this cycle in the state of Florida. 36 million voter attempts. A lot of those were by phone since midsummer. They made 24 million phone calls, have made 10 million texts, but they have already they got a late start just in the last few weeks of trying to rush and get back up and on the doors because of the pandemic. They've already tried to reach 1.3 million voters through doors, over 350,000 door knocks, and they're planning to make 1.5 million door knocks by election day. That is scaling up quickly. They're also doing this amazing stuff with really smart communications. Florida, as I've talked about on previous calls, is an incredibly diverse state. Even the Latino electorate here is like this incredibly diverse. It's not just Cuban, it's not just Puerto Rican, it's Colombians and Nicaraguans and Venezuelans and Hondurans and just tons and tons of different kind of sub-communities inside the Latino electorate here. And some of them are really being hard fought. The Venezuelan community, for example, that Trump has really tried to pull over to his side by his foreign policy around Venezuela. Florida for All is just doing some amazing communications and really kind of micro-targeting each of these communities, really creating conversation and really trying to pull voters towards our candidates. And those candidates are not just Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Those candidates are also our ability this cycle, first time since I've ever lived here, to have a progressive elected as countywide mayor in Miami-Dade County, which would be transformative to politics in South Florida, transformative to what progressive groups are able to win around housing, around criminal justice reform, around so many things in this county. Our partners have also been up and down the ballot, running campaigns to elect prosecutors, to elect sheriffs, to elect state representatives, progressive state representatives that won in their primaries and are going to win their general election here in a couple of weeks. So it's just been enormous transformative change that we're witnessing happening here on the ground. It's because of everything that you all have been able to do to help support this work here in Florida, and we are deeply, deeply thankful. Thank you.
Yeah, Eric. And if Florida is won on election night, we'll actually know on election night. So we're rooting for all the states, but we're especially rooting for Florida to win big on election night. Yeah, and people have alluded to models that are happening. There's an incredible model in Arizona, Instituto, that's helping all these groups grow that Corina works really closely with. There's an incredible race class narrative model that Rima is working closely with. It works. Oh, my screen's freezing. And Eric mentioned some of the models. I'm going to pass it to Jamila before my screen freezes again. Jamila Martin to talk about Michigan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jamila, and I'm the Michigan State Advisor. So I'm going to echo a lot of the things that you've heard from the other state advisors. So far this cycle, we have invested a little over $7 million into 40 groups in Michigan, which is very exciting, as all of the states are. I think, similar to what's happening in other states, there's just a complete difference in terms of the grassroots organizing that's happening in Michigan in 2020 versus what was happening in 2016. I am ashamed to say I'm something. I have an emotion. Maybe it's not shame, but I was a director of a grassroots organization in 2016 in Michigan, and we were not doing work on the election. We were doing school board work, and that's fine, but we had not planned to stop our issue campaigns. We really, when you're running an organization, you have issue campaigns, you have work you're driving, and if you actually want to do electoral work, you actually have to plan to stop all of that other stuff, and we didn't. And nobody that we really worked with did either. And I think we saw that in the results in 2016. And when I look around at all of the grassroots groups, the 40 groups that we're funding, and so many others who are part of the constellation of really amazing grassroots organizing that's existed in Michigan for years, but has been really focused on issue advocacy, those folks, everybody is talking about voting. Everybody is doing work to get folks out to the polls. And it's an incredibly different atmosphere at the grassroots level than it was in 2016, and that is really because of the resources that MVP has been able to put into those organizations, and also just the emphasis. I mean, like the push starting in 2019 of like, no, this is really coming. You really have to do it. And it was kind of like turning the Titanic, but they did, in time, get electoral programs up and running. And so that's really exciting. So a few numbers just about Michigan, where we are, in addition to the $7 million invested in 40 groups or so, almost 2 million people have already voted in Michigan. And I haven't even turned in my ballot yet. So 2,000,001 soon enough. There is a Democratic advantage so far of about 330,000 voters. And like Eric said, that's a number we really need to run up in the early voting period, because we know that day of will skew a bit more conservative. A number that I'm excited about, I'm not entirely sure if it's fully accurate, but I get it in my daily data dashboard, so I'm going to go ahead and say it. Infrequent progressive voters are showing up 4-to-1 to infrequent conservative voters so far in this early voting period, which is super exciting. And about 500,000 people who did not vote in 2016 have already voted early. So this is it's going to be kind of a historic, like Rima said, probably historic turnout that we've never seen in Michigan, and that's super exciting. The thing about our groups that is cool is that everybody's doing it different. So, you have some folks that are running massive text programs, massive call programs, and door knocking, like Eric talked about. We have some groups that, to be honest, scared me a little bit. I've been a little bit nervous working with some of our student groups, and then with campuses being closed and Corona happening, I've been scared about how that was going to go. But Billy can attest, checking in over the past few weeks with our student power network, it's been amazing. They have brought on like 16 new staff and are doing hundreds of vote parties and are actually figuring out how to connect with students both on and off campus. We've got groups who are doing freaking Vote Fridays, having folks show up. So in Michigan, you can, up until the day of the election, you can show up at the clerk's office, register and vote, all in one fell swoop, just at your clerk's office. And so folks are having, just pulling their friends right into the clerk's office, registering and vote. And because they're doing it every Friday, what's been really exciting is for people, because there's this 40 days, is for people to be able to show up the first time as like, I don't know what this is. Oh, I can register? Oh, okay, I can. That was cool. I did that. And then, okay, I'm going to bring my friend the next Friday. And so then they can bring a friend the next Friday. And it actually has become this thing where like every Friday, people are showing back up to the clerk's office with their next friend, and so forth and so on. People have really been digging in and leveraging the relational voter work, which is, to me, the promise of MVP and what I was so excited about when I came on board here. I sat in on a call with a training with 35 teachers a few days ago, who pulled up their relational voter apps and went through and found their students who are now 18 and above who were not likely to vote. And the organizer sat and explained to them, like, you've got your low priority and your high priority. Don't talk to your low priority. Those folks are already going to vote. And so people could actually go through and figure out, who are my friends and family who are not likely to show up, and make a plan to bring them to the polls. So people are doing all kinds of work. It's super exciting. I will say, it's not all perfect. We've got a really tight Senate race, and so we've got to keep working. But, and we also have to protect the election post November 3rd. And so a number of our groups have already started planning for that through the Michigan Fight Back table. I did a briefing just before this for faith leaders across the state about getting them engaged. And this afternoon, we'll have about 150 folks from across the state coming together to plan for that. So just know that planning is happening, and that we need you to stick with us all the way to the end. But thank you so much for everything you've done for Michigan. And here we go.
Thank you, Jamila. Whew, I love these stories. But let's go on to Pennsylvania, a state we're all very worried about. The tipping
I know. I'm
point.
like, There's no one that's praying harder for Eric in Florida than me, that's for sure. Because if we win Florida, then we will not have all of the potential drama in Pennsylvania, but we are spending a lot of time preparing for the drama in Pennsylvania. And in fact, I mean, I have spent personally like around the last week and a half myself, just kind of working with all of the groups to talk about post-election prep, as opposed to like really digging in on what they're currently doing around the election. But to back up a second, I mean, I think, you know, like every state, you know, Pennsylvania had a very surprising year, has had a very surprising year. We were one of the states that was hit early by the pandemic. And, you know, like we're still at a point where most of our partners aren't knocking on doors because the COVID rate has started to creep back up. We're now reporting something like 2,000 new cases a day. And so people are very worried about that. It's been very hitting pretty hard in BIPOC communities in particular. In this past cycle, MVP has funded 34 groups in Pennsylvania that are doing work in 27 of the 67 counties in Pennsylvania, and that includes nearly all of the largest counties in the state. So there are a lot of counties in Pennsylvania that have fairly small populations. We're not trying to like go and knock on doors or, you know, talk to folks door to door in the mountains, but we do have a pretty substantial vote program. Up until this point, Pennsylvania has, up until 2020, Pennsylvania neither had real access to mail balloting nor any form of early vote. And we have sort of piloted both of those things during the pandemic, thanks to a change in the state's election law that happened at the end of last year. And I think one of the reasons everybody's worried about Pennsylvania is that one of the things that happened, you know, our primary got pushed back by 6 weeks because of the pandemic. Most people voted by mail in the pandemic, and we didn't have our results of our statewide elections until 10 days after the primary because of how long it took to count the votes. The counties aren't allowed to do anything with the ballots before election day itself. So they can't do this thing called pre-canvassing where they like open the ballots and like make sure that they're a real voter and like the signatures match and do everything up to counting the votes. That stuff cannot start until election day. And it's been a concerted push by Republicans in the state legislature to prevent it from happening, despite the fact that county election clerks that are Republicans in most of the counties in the state have called for them to do it. So it is really a situation where the like national party is going to hurt the vote in Pennsylvania because of its, you know, insistence on sort of like towing the line for Trump. And so what we've got so far is we've had 9 million people register to vote in Pennsylvania. I mean, not this year. We cracked the 9 million number at the end of our voter registration period, which was this Tuesday. It's the first time Pennsylvania's ever had 9 million people registered to vote. So far, we have 1.3 million people that have voted. And of those, just around 950,000 were Democrats. So the Democrats have a big mail advantage, and you know that will continue, I think, to grow as the early voting and the mail voting continues to kind of come in. We, because we haven't had, you know, mail voting or early voting before, MVP really kicked off a huge early vote program particularly in Philly and Pittsburgh and in some of what are called the collar counties, the suburban counties right outside of Philadelphia, where we invested tons of money with WFP, One Hood, One Pennsylvania, other groups to say, like, we have this crazy opportunity where for the first time, a voter can go to the elections office, and the elections offices in some of the bigger counties opened multiple places for people to be able to do this. They can register to vote, they can request a mail ballot, and they can vote that mail ballot all in the same visit to the election center. So a lot of the votes that we've seen that have come in, those, you know, 1.3 million mail ballots, are actually votes from people who voted in person, some of whom who registered to vote that day. At this point in the process, you can't register to vote anymore because the voter registration deadline has passed, but a person who's already on the voter rolls can still walk into a voter center and in most of the big counties in the state and vote their ballot before election day. And so groups are continuing to drive that. So the total that we have so far, 1.3 million, is about just under 20% of the total vote that was cast in 2016, which is great because obviously, like, the more people that we get to turn out before the election, the less people that we have to focus on pushing to the polls on election day itself. We do have very big, sort of election day plans. There's lots of food trucks that are being sent to various polling places and cities around the state. I think we have like 15 different places where where groups are going to be having a food truck to make sure that people stay in line, and that if you're at a polling place that has a long line, we're sending some food there to make sure, people don't get frustrated, cold. I'd say there's not a ton of likelihood that the most motivated voters are not going to just say, yes, I'll suck it up and stand in line for 2 hours, but why not make that experience a little bit more pleasant for everyone? So we'll be having food trucks, vote fests, party of the polls, call it whatever you want to call it, in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Lancaster, and York. We have our C3 table is really coordinating the voter assistance around voter ballot challenges. So if a voter is having their ballot challenged because of a signature mismatched or something like that, the C3 table and all of the partners that are running C3 operations will be helping individual voters cure their ballots and fix those. They're also kind of anchoring a very substantial legal theorizing and strategy table because honestly, I think one of the things that we all in Pennsylvania are worried about is that this is an election that is going to end in the courts unless Florida pulls it together and we don't have to worry about winning Pennsylvania. we are going to see a series of legal challenges, I think. At one point I lost track of the number of lawsuits that the Trump campaign had filed in the state of Pennsylvania. We're also trying to figure out a little bit today, or how to have some kind of watch parties on election night that are outdoors, which is challenging, obviously, because of people's fears about the pandemic, and the fact that most of the cities have stopped giving permits for outdoor gatherings in a very responsible act of public health. But that's a thing that we're doing. Just to go back really quickly and talk about one of the partner organizations. So 10 years ago, Make the Road Pennsylvania didn't exist. For folks who are from New York, you're probably familiar with Make the Road New York. The Make the Road, sort of family of organizations now includes, since 2010, they've launched organizations in Pennsylvania, Connecticut, New Jersey, and Nevada. And the Pennsylvania group started, I want to say 2013-ish and they primarily exist in Allentown and Reading to organize the Latinx community there. They moved into Northeast Philadelphia in the 2018 cycle, and they've done a pretty amazing job of organizing the Latinx community in a part of the city that is changing very rapidly demographically, and that other groups weren't sort of working to organize. Prior to, sort of the pandemic, Make the Road had planned to actually have organizers and members from all of the other 4 states come to Pennsylvania because they know how crucial Pennsylvania is in terms of electing a president that is not going to be just attacking immigrants from day one. That plan kind of got changed, as all plans got changed because of the facts of 2020, but they have a volunteer operation that includes volunteers from all 5 of their states, as well as groups from allied organizations in New York City that is at this point making 50 to 100,000 phone calls to Pennsylvania voters a day. And they have made more than 1 million phone calls, just that one organization. So they're really doing an amazing job of contacting a voter population that honestly really wasn't very engaged by people from their own community in 2010, and in 2016 was still pretty nascent, because they were only about 3 years old at that point. In terms of overall MVP, we've moved nearly $10 million to Pennsylvania at this point, and it really has allowed the groups that we work with, who mostly are either BIPOC-led or are working in BIPOC communities, to have the kind of influence in the sort of state ecosystem, including all of the other progressive mainstream organizations, that they haven't been able to achieve up until this point. And I think it's really important that we've lifted up their ability to be around all the time, and not just to be the kinds of groups that people are like, we're going to throw a canvas contract at you. We'll give you, $100,000 in the last 2 months to go knock on doors. They are now the people who are actually leading the strategy in the communities in which they are organizing. And that's been a huge, a seismic tectonic shift in Pennsylvania, which is amazing. We are all feeling pretty good about, Biden. The polling has been good. Nobody's like, taking anything for granted. Everybody's going to leave it all in the field. But we are also having an extraordinarily coordinated set of plans that is coming together of like people from all different kinds of organizations, both MVP partner groups and not, to think about the plan of what's going to happen between the 3rd and the 7th, and then between the 7th and December 8th, when the state legislature has to, send the electors forward. And so, one thing I just want to say, as the person on this call who's probably the oldest white person that's here as a presenter, is to my fellow middle-aged white people. We asked these BIPOC groups to help us fight back. We aren't leaving them behind when we win this election. We absolutely must continue to fund and support the BIPOC-led organizations as we move into the progressive decade, because we all want an America that is more progressive, and the only way that we are going to do that is by giving BIPOC-led groups equality with the white-led groups in our ecosystems. So thank you all for those who have contributed to making that happen. Super important, and I'm going to turn it back over to Billy.
Yeah, Katie. And I'm going to pass it. I keep freezing, so I'm just going to pass it to Leila Kato Mirna. And we're transitioning into talking about Senate states, and a lot of these states are Senate and presidential. But go ahead, Leila, take it away.
Awesome, thank you. Hey y'all, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, my name is Leila Ali, and I'm the State Partnerships Associate here at MVP, as well as the Georgia State Advisor. I also live and organize in North Carolina, which I rep really hard. And since our fabulous North Carolina State Advisor, Jillian Johnson, could not make it on the call today, I get to share with y'all what's happening in 2 of my favorite states, North Carolina and Georgia. So let me first start by saying that our 31 partners in North Carolina are absolutely holding it down across the state, organizing in 30 counties, 20 of which are rural, where many of our competitive state House and Senate districts are. And just to name a few, they're working in Durham, Wake, Mecklenburg, Forsyth, Guilford, New Hanover, and Alamance counties. And as of today, these numbers are truly mind-blowing and incredible. 2.1 million voters have voted in North Carolina, which is about 30% of registered voters, doubling the amount of votes cast in 2016. And the Democratic turnout is 50% higher than Republicans, and 22% of voters did not vote in 2016. And what this means is that in North Carolina, will possibly be over 50% turnout before Election Day. And I'll tell you a little bit of why we're seeing these incredible and mind-blowing numbers. For the past decade, North Carolina has been experiencing a right-wing surge. We've been battling voter suppression, racially gerrymandered districts, and a state legislature that has worked so hard to dismantle public education, unemployment insurance, Medicare, and of course, voting rights. But as a result, our organizing efforts here in North Carolina are really strong, and we have developed a very deep understanding of how important this election is. We understand that our state cannot survive another 10 years of right-wing rule. And we've learned how important elections are more generally, particularly down-ballot elections, to our people's lives and our collective futures. So we are ready, our groups are ready, and have been working on winning the White House, flipping the US Senate seat currently held by Thom Tillis, and netting 6 seats in the NC House and 5 in the NC Senate to break the Republican control of the state legislature. And just to summarize everything I've shared about North Carolina in a few words, and one thing I really want you to remember and take with you beyond this space, is that every single issue is on the ballot in North Carolina this year, and every single race is critical. Literally since 2008, North Carolina has helped determine who is in the White House. And so I'm gonna quickly jump into Georgia, which is another favorite state, real quick. Catching up pretty quickly with North Carolina, almost 2 million Georgians have voted so far in 2020, and over 7.5 million Georgians registered to vote this year, a record-breaking figure and a more than 8% increase from 2018. We have 18 partners in Georgia that are mobilizing over 3 million voters across the state in a little over 40 counties, including the Metro Atlanta counties of Gwinnett and Cobb, and they're also securing votes across all Black Belt counties, including Bibb, Fulton, Chatham, Clark, and Richmond. Like North Carolina, Georgia has a critical Senate race to flip, and not just one, but 2. Our partner groups are working to win the 2 Senate races and net the majority of 16 House seats needed for the Georgia State House to break the Republican trifecta. They're also working on key races like county commissioner, district attorney, sheriff, and board of education races, and are organizing around the issues of immigration enforcement and 287G programs, criminal justice reform, police accountability, and many issues that are directly impacting our people and our communities. And not only are they organizing to flip key legislative races and engaging underrepresented communities, including Black, Latinx, AEPI, Muslim, and young voters, but they're having to do this amidst a horrifying pandemic. COVID-19 has really presented many challenges to our groups and has made it increasingly difficult for them to build base with their constituencies without being able to go door-to-door canvassing, which they've been able to do in the last elections and several years. And just to take you to the field for a bit and draw a picture of how groups are mitigating these challenges, I want to share a conversation I had with Mondale Robinson, who I have so much respect for and the work that they do, the executive director of Black Male Voter Project, who said, you know, Layla, we have to think of something new and creative to be able to engage with our people. The way we win, he said, and get Black men to the polls is by having intentional one-on-one and face-to-face conversations. And I could honestly not agree with him more. Organizing in this moment is super hard, and I really want to acknowledge that and bring that into the space. He then said to me, we created an innovative interactive lit that they're dropping in 16 cities across Georgia, where people can literally scan a QR code and a video will pop up, and they'll see people who look like them, share their stories and their voices, and be able to tell them why this election is important and ask them to fill out a survey about their needs and the issues that matter to them. And Mondale and so many other leaders in Georgia are organizing not to just boost voter engagement, but reduce turnout disparities and build long-term organizing power across the state, which will last way beyond 2020. And so what are groups in North Carolina and Georgia doing right now, and where is our support most needed? I look to the number of our partners who are putting together massive voter defense projects across the state and are doing it in very creative ways. They're bringing food trucks, music, and dancing in order to make sure voters are able to vote, stay on the lookout for any unfair or illegal practices, and make sure voters aren't intimidated at the polls. And this is so crucial because both North Carolina and Georgia have a number of counties where racial justice fights over the last few years have created hotspots for racist mobilization. And these are exactly the polling sites our partner groups are targeting. And in addition to that, they're preparing to respond to threats and incidents of violence related to the election and those that can come up post-election, like organizing trainings and conversations on legal support, physical and digital safety, cross-state solidarity, and messaging to support our communities and our people in a potential state of panic and rapid response. And one more quick highlight I want to put is while our Georgia partners are doing everything I just mentioned, they're in a unique situation where their finish line doesn't quite end in November, but possibly January, with the 2 Senate races potentially being runoffs. So the state will definitely have a big say of which party might control the US Senate. And I just wanted to end by saying I have witnessed firsthand how important MVP support is for our groups, because I co-founded one of our groups in North Carolina, Muslim Women for, a local and grassroots group that started as a storytelling space and now working to advocate Black, Brown, and Muslim women in North Carolina. We started 4 years ago as the presidential elections were unfolding and shortly after the Chapel Hill shootings that left 3 of our Muslim friends and local members killed in Chapel Hill. And in that moment, it was an important political moment and also an important time in our local history in North Carolina that really left the Muslim community very shook in very different ways. And 4 years ago, we knew nobody was investing in our community and in Muslim American communities, and we couldn't do robust vote work because we were literally paying everything out of pocket. And now with MVP's support, who is also our biggest funder, and 4 years later, which we're living in a very important political moment as well, we were able to dream bigger and are engaging in getting 40,000 Muslim Americans out to vote in North Carolina, which I honestly, sometimes I can't believe that we've come all this way, but we did. With the support of all of you and MVP. So I'll end here, and I hope this gives you a clear picture of what's happening in both Georgia and North Carolina, and I'll pass it back to you, Billy.
Oh my God, Layla, you're bringing tears to my eyes. And I will just pass it to Caro to talk I should give people's full names. Carolina Ramirez, who's going to talk about Texas. So Layla, Caro, and Mirna are all national staff, and they also advise states as well. Go ahead, Caro.
Thanks so much, Billy. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. I'm Caro Ramirez, and I'm super excited to talk about Texas and Iowa. So let's get started. I hardly can believe I just got off a call with partners on the ground. We are funding 29 partners in the state of Texas who are in every major metro region and surrounding areas, and also including a border region, which is El Paso. All of these areas make up over 90% of the vote in 2018. So they're incredibly important areas. The partners that we fund are organizations that are led by Black, Indigenous, people of color, by young people, and who are often organizing on a daily with underinvested voters. Thanks to MVP, we have supported with over $2.8 million this year to work on the ground, digital organizing, and calling phones all over. And we can see that we are making huge advances because the state of Texas has broken turnout records almost every day with over 5.8 million people voting, which is a huge deal. And over 5 million people actually voting in person. Just for a note, more people have voted early this year for Trump in 2016. There are more than 16.9 million registered voters, which means that we have more than 1.9 million new voters who are registered in the state of Texas. Just to share a couple of highlights, the Latinx community is turning out at 22% of the total registered, and Black voters are turning out in massive numbers at 32% of the total number registered. They are outpacing other folks around the state. And what's at stake is really that we are 9 seats away from flipping our state ledge and having a majority, the first time in 20 years. And the cool thing is that, progressives have done this before in the midterms, where 9 of the competitive districts, Beto won more votes than Cruz in. So we know that these can make a huge impact and make a huge impact in the US Senate seat as well. I'm super inspired, not only by the numbers, but by the depth of conversations. As we know, in the state of Texas, the GOP has really taken to making sure that voting is as complex, confusing, and frustrating as humanly possible. And I am inspired by, for example, Texas organizing Project PAC, which, by the way, has reached 1.3 million voters for folks that love numbers, started their in-person canvassing 11 days ago, and have shared how their volunteers actually pushed the whole membership, the leadership of the organization, and said, we need to go door-to-door canvassing because this is the election of our lives. And so we're going to put our lives on the line to make sure that our people can vote. And so they are driving up in cars, having Zoom calls as volunteers to do the prep before they go canvassing, and making sure that they do it in a safe, secure way. Just got off a call with Texas Freedom Network, which has a youth portion of organizing, and they have been doing calls all over the state of Texas, and specifically for the Railroad Commission, which, by the way, is hugely important for oil and gas regulations in the state. Not a lot of people usually pay attention to it, but thanks to MVP's investment, they have been burning through their lists. They have texted over 1.5 million people, and these are young people of color under 30 that are being talked about the oil and gas decision makers in the state. This could literally change environmental justice for years and decades to come. They have actually started onboarding 56 deputy field organizers, so you can imagine the kind of impact that these folks will have. I am worried that as of now, we've learned that underinvested voters have still not been contacted by the campaign, and there are GOP unlikely voters that are turning out in higher rates than progressives. And there are attempts to sow confusion and distrust in the election system. And I'm very worried that this is a state where over 600,000 people have lost healthcare because of COVID and the government's inaction. But I have a lot of hope that we can actually that we're doing something right now to change the state because of the investment that MVP has done early on. Thanks to y'all, we are, our organizations are having deep community connections with people, having conversations on a day-to-day, helping people, meeting them where they are, if they need food, if they need to make sure that they are covering their rent for the day. Our organizations are not only helping them with that, but to make sure that they're able to navigate the very confusing voter process. And so just a couple of examples of key things that we need. Workers' Defense, for pre-election work, the Texas Organizing Project has expanded their mailing program for targeting low, underinvested voters in big urban counties. And they're looking for a little bit under $100,000 for their PAC. Texas Rising, which the organization I mentioned, this organizing young people of color under 30, has expanded their list. I mentioned that they're burning through lists over and over again. They need 30,000 more in order to be able to continue to call more people. And in terms of post-election work, we know of just quickly immediate $210,000 to make sure that election protection work is underway and ready to be able to mobilize in time. And just really quick, because I'm also covering Iowa, let's do a pivot and acknowledge that Iowa has the most competitive Senate seat in the country. We are funding 6 organizations here, including CCI, Great Plains, Action Society, and Social Justice Advocates, which is a Black Voters Matter chapter. These are rural folks, these are Native folks, these are young folks, Black-led organizers, LGBTQ-led organizers in the state of Iowa. And we really need to continue to support them. We funded $517,000 so far. They are in all 4 congressional districts. And so far turnout is over 600,000 mail-in ballots cast. So I'm just gonna do a quick, a quick snippet of CCI's call messaging that they share with people all over the country. They have this great ad by a member of CCI. Her name is Vanessa Marcano Kelly. She's a Venezuelan American. And she says, I take my civic duty to vote so seriously. It takes courage to be an immigrant. Although the unknown scares us, we know we need to move forward and terror is no longer an option for our people. We must take back control and the first step is voting. You can go to your election office and vote during the week. And she goes on to explain how, where, and when, and where to go for more information. These are the kind of ads that are running through all over the state of Iowa. And then folks, organizers are calling people to make sure that they're able to explain one-on-one in person, like how to be able to vote. And we can go on and have many more stories about Iowa, but also I want to give a quick shout out to Nebraska because I am also supporting there. Just a quick shout out that in the Omaha district, we have funded over 7 partners, $367,000. These are some small and medium-sized organizations that would never have gotten this kind of support before, that are organizing workers, that are organizing Latino and Black working class people. We know that Nebraska too is key for the presidential race, and we want to make sure that people have what they need to be able to turn out to vote. Thank you so much. There are Iowa gaps, which I will include in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Caro. And there are gaps, we should say, in all of these states, both pre-election gaps and post-election gaps. And it's not too late to move money. We're funding money to groups as fast as we can. So if you can move any last money or know anyone who can, it's not too late. We're going to be moving it right up to election day and paying bills afterwards. So go ahead, Myrna.
Hi, everybody, and thank you all so much for being on this. It's been so awesome to hear all of the state advisors talk about the key states that we're working with, and just really proud to be part of this team. I'm going to do a quick little overview of just some of the other Senate states that we're supporting and try to keep it short to make sure that we have ample time for questions and other pieces. But really excited to tell you that we are also supporting and working in states like Montana, where Montana Forward, a youth youth-led organization, has just been kicking butt and making sure that young people are turning out, have been registered, and doing as much work as they can to ensure that BIPOC and young people are represented. We're also working in Alaska, a little bit of a longer shot, but y'all, we have found Native-led, Black-led groups in Alaska and are supporting their work and their efforts to try to get representation and just organize their communities, which is really exciting. And we're also working in Maine, where we've been working with key partners. Maine People's Alliance has just been at it for a while now, trying to make sure that that we win there. And we're also supporting in Kansas. And so for those of you who don't know, I actually went to college in Kansas because I grew up in Kansas City, but the Missouri side doesn't allow undocumented youth to go to school. They don't have tuition equity or institutions of higher education, but surprisingly so, a very conservative state like Kansas does. If you're an undocumented young person, you can go to college and get tuition equity and access in the state of Kansas. And we're also really working in that race that seems to get more and more competitive as we see it. And Billy wanted me to share a story of just the work that's been happening there. Many of you might not know, Kansas has really amazing organizations. We're founding and funding a great youth-led organization called Loud Light that's been working to work in different campuses and get young people registered and really involved in civic engagement in the state. But the state of infrastructure and organizing isn't so big, and it isn't very representative of Black and Brown communities in the state. And we've been trying to find other ways to invest, to get creative. We fully funded, along with all of our partners, Loud Light's Gap, funded their expansion plans, and as much as they could take to be able to do the work. And we were thinking, and we're like, groups and people still want to continue investing, help people defend their seats, or figure out if we can make history and have another woman and Democratic senator in the state of Kansas. And so I reached out to some friends there that are now involved, in local government in Kansas, running the Office of Hispanic and Latino Affairs and other things. And I was like, who's reaching out to Latinx voters? In some key counties in the state of Kansas, like Dodge City and Liberal and others, Latinx people make up over 50% of the population and are not being represented. But we know that there's a couple of folks that are making big waves. So I reached out and said, what are folks doing? And the answer is not, there isn't a lot of organizing infrastructure. And so we put our heads together. We're like, what organizations can take mini grants to do relational voter outreach? How can we help? And within the matter of like hours, we got a proposal from the Voter Network, which is kind of a mini table that's supporting service providers and other grassroots groups voterize themselves and learn how to reach out to people to turn out and vote and do really amazing work. And we're able to fund a program for Latinx outreach that includes hiring 2 organizers, providing mini grants for 15 Latinx serving organizations in the state that hadn't done vote work before, which is really cool. And it just resulted after like one quick call that would not have existed or have been happened or would have happened without the support of MVP. So love being able to say and talk about stories about where we've really kind of put our heads together and figured out how we can increase representation, voter outreach for communities of color in states where it might not otherwise be happening. And this is just a very small sampling of what happens in all of these states, because I know a lot of these organizers and a lot of the state advisors that you've heard from have done similar things, whether it's being on the ground directly helping groups or figuring out how we can get creative to support outreach to underrepresented communities in different states, especially when they're so close, when the polls keep inching, and when we know that we might have a shot like in my family state of Kansas. So super excited about that. Also happy to answer any questions that y'all might have about some of the other states. MVP supports over 500 grassroots organizations around the country, and we've moved millions with your help. This is the first time in a long time that I do this work where I know that there's organizations that are going into November 3rd with fully funded programs, thanks to you. Not saying that there aren't any gaps, but that's like a huge thing to celebrate, knowing that some of our core institutional partners or new programs like this are going into next week with the ability to plan and already have headspace to think about what happens the day after the election, because they don't have to worry about fundraising for this GOTV push, is amazing and a testament to everything that you all have helped us accomplish. So thank you so very much. This is, super grateful to be able to say that and share that with folks. So I'm going to pass it back to Billy and our team so that we can talk a little bit about fundraising and what happens after November 3rd.
Yeah. Oh, what a brilliant team. Like, can make some noise in your own muted way, or like celebrate, like just like incredible organizers who are all so connected to so many incredible organizers. Like, oh, what a team. And Myrna's kind of like the wizard behind the curtain. Actually, one of the multiple wizards behind the curtain who like make all of this happen. So thank you. And there are a bunch of states we didn't cover. Hopefully this is what you saw is just a sampling. And I'll just say really quick before I pass it to Elizabeth, that we are making a commitment to build this beyond the election. Yeah, and you'll be hearing a lot more about this. And we've actually, one of the conversations, Myrna and Kato and others have been like, hey, I'm talking to groups like back in June, July, August, like, hey, is the money going to go away after the election? Are we going to have to lay everyone off? Like, what's going to happen? They're trying to make plans. And so we had to do some hard analysis. Like, can we commit to these states after 2020? Like, honestly, mostly funding falls off a cliff. Like, election money is really terrible. Like, everyone, whether you win or you lose, usually everyone disappears for a year, and foundations go do strategic planning for a year, and then people come back like in the summer of 2 years later, and we have to rebuild again. So we did an analysis, and all of our top tier states are going to be perennial battlegrounds in 2022 and 2024. So we were able to make a pretty amazing commitment to all of our top tier states to say, adding 2 more top tier states, Georgia and Texas, which have earned their perennial battleground stripes, and we're going to keep continuing to fund the tier 2 and tier 3 states at other levels too. So right here, right now, you probably hearing it for the first time, MVP is making a 4-year commitment at the least to continuing to fund the ecosystems in all of these states. And to do that, the only way to do that is donor organizing, right? And we've built an incredible donor organizing network that so many of you are part of, have done so much work for. And yeah, so we're in this together. Let's connect post-election and talk and dream together about, basically state advisors are going to be working with their groups, like, what are your dreams to transform Texas, to transform Wisconsin, to transform Michigan over the next 10 years? And let's partner with you on that vision. So with that, I will pass it to our brilliant comms director, Elizabeth Fernandez, to do some, comms strategy visioning about how to talk about the election. Passing it to you. And Elizabeth, by the way, made this awesome deck.
Thank you, Billy, and everyone. I'm just so constantly amazed and honored to be working with such a powerful team, and honestly with so many committed donors who are really saying, this is how we're going to make a really big impact and difference, and here's how we're going to help really support organizing in communities of color, where people are really empowering themselves and saying, we want to be the leaders that we've been needing, and seeing that happen is just amazing. So I want to talk about this election and what it actually means. If you could move to the next slide. So first of all, this movement is bigger than any single election, even the most important election of our lives. And I want that to be a real phrase that's in all of our minds. Whatever happens, win or lose, a contested election with weeks of battles, the movement's bigger than even that. And that is because, as you've heard, so much of this is long-term thinking, long-term planning. You know, if you go back and watch the Arizona video, for example, you really see that. You see people who were standing up in Arizona against a really brutal law 10 years ago that really attacked like the Latinx community. And those people stood up, and 10 years later, running organizations are turning Arizona from a bright red state into a purple state that could be one of the deciding state votes in this election. And that's because people stood up and realized, even in really, really, really dark moments, this movement matters more than any single election, any single policy, any single law. We're really in this for the long run. And I want all of us to be able to speak about that. I have some personal experience with being in a contested election. I was the communications manager at Florida Immigrant Coalition in 2018, when we actually had a contested election and weeks of recounts. And, you know, literally, like, I know what it's like to be trying to do an interview with Telemundo and having literally right-wing protesters attacking me and assaulting me, like, on camera. This is so real, and it gets so scary. And for our grassroots partners who are putting it on the line, who are putting their lives, their families on the line, we need to be there for them in every single way possible. And we also need to talk about ways that are empowering the work and empowering voters and donors without actually reciting some of the talking points that the right wing wants us to. And it's so easy to do that. We need to amplify the right messages. And one of the absolute biggest ones is count every vote. You know, that's going to be the big hashtag. Follow that, speak about that, say it till you're blue in the face. You know, count every vote, because we know with everything that's happening, this election will most probably not be over on November 3rd. Election night results are never official, and this year we might not know the results for days or longer. So when we're talking to our friends, to our families, talk about election season, talk about the fact, you know, be open and honest that we might not know on November 3rd who the winner is going to be, and be okay with that, because that is really what we need. If we've got Pennsylvania voting, you know, where votes are being counted days after November 3rd, then that's right, we still need to count those votes. And we know that by joining together as voters and as donors, we're going to deliver a democracy where everyone counts, no exceptions, making sure every vote counts, every person counts. Trump is losing, and he knows that. So he is trying to use fear to divide and distract us from his failure. And that's one of the things we really need to push and talk about. We can't let ourselves feel like we're losing because Trump is spouting lies and organizing from a place of anger. You know, we know better, and by joining together as voters in record numbers, we are protecting a democracy where everybody counts. We need to say that over and over and over again, ourselves, in our messaging and our social media, with our friends and families, when we're organizing our own donors and our own families to give. This is what we need to say. And I love, if you move on to the next slide, I also really love being able to know which words to embrace and which words to replace, because it's really easy to slip into messaging that's actually right-wing messaging without us realizing it. Talking about swearing in new leaders, for example, instead of electing new leaders, it's understanding that the democratic process requires patience, and this may be a big period of uncertainty that we're going to be facing about the outcome, and understanding that this election is going to keep going, and especially if it's a contested election, all the way up until new leaders are sworn in, and making sure that every vote is counted. So that's talking about election season, understanding that Trump is trying to bully and cheat his way through an election because he knows he's losing, versus saying Trump is stealing the election, Trump is rigging the election. And I'll tell you why that's so important. Saying that Trump is stealing the election, you lose all hope immediately. It makes you feel like voting and donating and knocking on doors, what's that even going to matter if Trump is going to steal it? That's their language. That's defeatist language. We need to mobilize people to be voters, to be funders now and in the future. And that means having confidence that voting is an action worth taking. The US has always held elections, even in times of great crises, even during previous pandemics, even during world wars, even during civil wars. So now it's our turn to prove that nothing is going to stand in the way of our democratic commitment to voting. And that means not saying that Trump is making it impossible to vote. When you say that, he wins. Because if somebody says it's impossible to vote, why am I even going to try? Why am I going to donate? Why am I going to give? If he's going to steal the election and he's making it impossible. We need to reassure voters. We need to reassure our friends and families this election will be conducted successfully. Despite the challenges, we know we'll overcome it by voting together in greater numbers than ever. And so it's just really important for us to really think about this. And, you know, and I would really love to go to the next slide, because it is about one of the things you can do right now. Please support our Defend the Election Fund. And Naomi's going to talk a little bit more about that and where we are with our fundraising with that. But, you know, we really need a war chest. And that means making sure that we have enough money to support our groups, to support things like, and I'll tell you this from being in a contested election in 2018, we were thinking, okay, do we need to hire security guards when we have a press conference because right-wing people are going to come in and physically attack us? And that happened. I mean, those are actual questions that grassroots organizers are asking themselves on the ground when it comes to their personal safety. So we need to make sure that we are there to support legal battles, that we are there to defend our amazing grassroots partners that have put everything on the field and done everything. And we also need to be there, frankly, to fight the court battles that, especially Katie was mentioning in Pennsylvania. Listen, they are pouring so much money into court fights. We need to have the money to be able to legally defend the vote and make sure that every vote is counted. So please, movement.vote/defend. Right now, we really, really need it. And I am going to hand this off to Naomi, who's going to talk about some important fundraising updates and where we are now.
Hi, y'all. Can you hear me? Can you stop sharing the screen also? Set the slide deck up. Whatever, we can keep that up too. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everybody. I love these calls. I came to MVP as a donor, and we didn't have these kind of calls this often, and I'm so glad that so many of you now get to hear from the folks I get to work with every day on the more regular, because it's such a treat, and it helps me sleep at night. I don't know about you, to know that we are connected to and supporting and working hand in hand with folks on the front line in so many incredible places. Maybe what I want to talk about now, you know, Lawrence in the chat, you know, sort of gave me a little softball here. Do we prefer unrestricted gifts or to defend the election fund? Here's what I'll say. I know that so many of you have already gone above and beyond what you ever thought you were going to do for this election. And I want to appreciate that. And that's true in terms of how much you've given, in terms of taking risks with conversations with folks you really try not to talk politics with, and by, you know, organizing parties online in a platform that might be not more comfortable for you. Folks have really gone all out. And I also know that some of us are like, well, now what do we do? And there are a couple of things we can do, right? We can make sure that MVP's groups they're all going into the election with a plan for what to do next. We can make sure that they are resourced to be able to execute those plans. And that's true for the immediate post-election period, which is the Defend the Election Fund. And it's also true going forward generally, right? Like Billy kicked us off saying, and Elizabeth said it again, like, this is about a movement. This is about actually harnessing all the energy that's happening right now about getting rid of some incredible perpetrators of harm, and installing folks who our movement folks can actually have a productive, critical, pressureful relationship with, to make progress on our issues, to roll back some of the incredibly harmful things that have been done. And some of that's going to need to happen. Whoever gets elected in whichever office it ends up, and at what timeline we end up knowing who that is, folks are going to need the money right away to make sure all the votes get counted, and they're going to need the money going forward to be able to execute on their longer term plans, their longer term vision, to be able to keep on all the incredible staff that they've just spent the whole last year training up. And MVP really wants to be there to make that happen. So if you are someone who comes to this work really fired up about the election and the movement stuff is something that you understand as part of your goals around the election, give to the Defend the Election Fund and do it now. If what's really keeping you going is your connection to movement work, give unrestricted, become a monthly donor. We'll take it all, we'll put it to good use. If in some miracle situation, the groups don't need the Defend the Election Fund for the kinds of lawsuits and shenanigan prevention that we are expecting them to, they are going to put it to good work. So either way, it's a great thing to do. We have already raised $500,000 for the Defend the Election Fund, which is amazing. We would love to triple or quadruple that. Remember, Caro said, just in Texas, there's a $250,000 need for immediate post-election work. So we would really love to have this fund be larger. And that's going to take additional support from all of you, right? We've all gone all out to get to this point, and we want to make sure it sticks. So I will leave it there and pass it back to Billy.
Thank you, Naomi, and thank you everyone for staying on. What an incredible team, and what an incredible team all of us are together, all the groups, all the donors, everyone you heard from and everyone we're connected to. We will see you back here on November 4th, and we will be celebrating and figuring out how to go from here. So have a wonderful next 12 days, everyone. Let's keep calm, keep hydrated, and keep turning out the vote so we can celebrate everything that happens after that.